all abusing their positions to avoid the consequences of their actions. And I've been told that that is not an Oregon government ethics violation.
Huh. Yeah, if it doesn't, so our laws are very specific and they do fall, we can only enforce what falls within our jurisdiction. So um that being said, let me go ahead and jump into this. All right.
Yep.
Yep. So go ahead. Today is we're going to talk about use of office and conflicts of interest. So um this is going to be a very big, broad overview of the ethics laws concerning use of office and conflicts of interest. So we always tell people that if you need the more specifics of these, always refer back to the actual statutes. And in this course, again, just a broad overview. It's not legal advice. You should always go back to the statutes and always follow up with contacting us if you have more specific questions. But first and foremost, I want to give you guys a big thanks for taking time out of your schedules to take this training with me. Training is a big part of what we do over here at the commissions. And so, we get a kick out of everyone stepping up and taking the training. So I know there'll be a lot of questions. Go ahead and answer them or ask them during this presentation. If I don't know the answer, I'll get back to you with a follow-up email to get that answer for you. My name's Charlie. And so my responsibility here today is to make this a little bit easier to understand and hopefully not too painful to sit through. So as a public official, Oregon has declared that your role as a public official is one of public trust. And so one way we safeguard that trust is by following the rules that are in ORS 244. So as a response, it's up to us as a public official. It's our responsibility to follow these rules. So this could look like a number of different things. In here today, we're going to talk about using your official position for financial gain, what gifts are appropriate to accept, and also when we need to disclose conflicts of interest. So we'll talk a little bit about gifts today, but not a whole lot because there's a whole separate training on that. And so I just also want to state that not only is it our responsibility as a public official, but if you're in violation of ethics laws, it's that person. We don't go after an entire agency. We go after the individual. Okay. So you heard me say this before. Again, broad overview. If you need to review more specific statutes, this is not going to be it. You need to do that on your own. You can always follow up with questions. Again, also, no way is this legal advice. That, again, you'd have to go back to the actual statutes. At any point you ever have questions or need to reach out to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission or OGEC, as you see here, you're going to hear me say OGEC quite a bit. That's going to be Oregon Government Ethics Commission. Feel free to contact us. I'll give you all our contact information at the very end of this presentation. All right, so a little bit about OGEC. We were enacted in 1974, and the goal here was to reestablish public trust in government. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we do have 9 staff members, including myself, and we also have 9 volunteer commissioners as well. And so our jurisdiction covers a couple different things. The big one that we cover or oversee is Oregon Government Ethics Law, which is ORS Chapter 244. It's a big chunk of where we spend our time. We also have a little bit in lobby regulation law, which is an ORS 171. Again, not going to talk about that today because that's a whole separate training. And then the other one is going to be executive session provisions 192. And that's just part of the public meetings law. We only have jurisdiction over executive session. So if anyone ever comes to us with a public meetings question, it has to be specifically to executive session. Otherwise, it's not our jurisdiction. We can't comment on it. So the big 5 that we cover in the Oregon Government Ethics Commission that we kind of have jurisdiction over is going to be use of office. We're going to talk about that today. Conflicts of interest, again, we're going to talk about that today. Nepotism, we don't really talk about that too much because it is in the statutes, but this training is specific to use of office and conflicts of interest. Nepotism kind of, with conflicts of interest, it kind of bleeds over into nepotism. Then we also have a training for gifts. And then the last one is a big one. This has been a big topic for us this year, is statement of economic interest. So all those folks just filed their statement of economic interest, those public officials that are required to. So let's go ahead and do a knowledge check while I have y'all here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll. It's 5 questions. It's anonymous. Um, Go ahead and take your time answering those, and I'm going to mute while you do that, and I'll jump back on and we'll talk about them as this presentation goes forward. So I'm going to mute out and let y'all do y'all's thing. All right, awesome. Thanks for doing that. So we'll see those. We're going to review those questions as we go through this presentation. So we'll see those again. So like all good presentations, we always need to start off with some definitions. So from the definitions, we build on these. So we're gonna, by getting the definitions out of the way, we'll kind of see the rules or the statutes kind of come into play, and getting these definitions done kind of makes the rules a little bit easier to understand. So the first one is going to be public official. So public official is any elected official, it's any appointed official, it's an employee of the city, a county, a special district, any other public body, or an agent. That's someone that's also representing a public body. And this is regardless of whether you're compensated for your role or not. Okay, so an example of those folks that are not compensated for their role would be volunteer firefighters, volunteer librarians, folks that volunteer for the parks departments. Those would all be, even though they may not be being compensated financially for their role, they are still public officials because they are working in a as a person, they're working as a public official in a public capacity, representing an agency, public body. So, but yeah, this includes police officers, school teachers. I'm a state employee, so that makes me a public official. City council members. Um, so that means that since you're sitting in this course, except Ricky, do you work for a state agency or a public body, or are you just a private citizen?
I'm a private citizen that I just since the whole COVID thing started, I started reading law and case law rules, pretty much all of the documents that the state has to offer,
Okay.
and I noticed some violations of substantive law and deprivation of rights, and so that's what I've been trying to address ever since.
Okay. All right. So in this slide, it's not talking to you, but yeah, most folks that take the training are public officials. Um, so this would be you, Robin. Um, so just I want you to keep in mind that it doesn't matter if you're an employee or a volunteer. If you're serving a public body, you are a public official. Okay.
Yep, jurors are considered public servants as well.
Yep. So relatives, the definition of relatives. Now we all know what a relative is by our standards, right? But in the statutes, it's very specific. So when it talks about who a relative is, it's talking about your spouse, it's talking about your children, your stepchildren, your daughter-in-laws, your sons-in-laws, your parents, your step-parents, your siblings, your step-siblings, your spouses, and your spouse's family, their children, and their parents. I do want to add something to this that a relative is also someone that you owe a support obligation to. It's also anyone that's receiving benefits of your employment. And then the third one in this category is anyone that you yourself receive a benefit from their employment. So that's the definition of a relative. You'll notice that it doesn't include grandparents, it doesn't include grandchildren, nieces, aunts, uncles, nephews, cousins. Those do not fall in the definition of a relative by the statutes. So let's go to the next one. So next one's going to be household member. So household member is any person who lives in your home. Okay, so at this point, this could be a significant other. This should now change things up a little bit. It could be a grandparent. It could be foster children. It could be exchange student. It could be a cousin. It could be a roommate. It could even be your best friend. Okay, so when we start talking about a household member, it's basically anyone that lives in your home. So the next definition that we run across is a business. So business by the statutes is any legal entity that's operated for economic gain. Okay, so this could be a self-employed individual. This could be a LLC. This could be a corporation. It could be a partnership. It could be a firm. So as long as that entity is operated for economic gain, it's a business. So that's the definition of a business. And now we're going to get into a business with which you are associated with. Okay. And this is going to be not just you, but your relative or a member of your household. And they break it down two different ways. So for a private business, for that business for you to be associated with, it would have to be you or a relative or a member of your household would need to be either a director, an officer, an owner, or an employee or an agent of that business. And this is a private business, okay? So this would be your mom and pop type business. Or they would have to own stock, equity interest, stock options, debt instruments of $1,000 or more, okay? So when we say private business, this is one that's not selling stock on the stock market, okay? It's not publicly traded, okay? Which brings us to our next business.
How far does that agent designation? How does that apply? Does that apply like in accordance with the uh, laws of agency,
So an agent would be this. Let me back up a moment. Let me give you the
or
definition
is it
of.
a like a documented agent on the Secretary of State papers? Because
So an
there's acting in agency for someone, and then there's like being a documented agent on state documents.
okay. So this would be an agent for private business. Okay.
So act well, right? That's what I mean. So like, if an officer acted at the direction of a private business, would he be an agent of that business, even though he is also a public servant?
That's a good question. So I have to get back with you on that one.
because that has a lot to do with the ethics complaint I made.
Okay. Hang on. I'm making a note of it. So you're asking if an officer is an agent of a private business?
It Yes, so if they act at the direction of a private business rather than acting in accordance with their statutory commands.
Okay. Okay. Good question.
Because essentially, a private business could order an officer to violate the law, and if he doesn't say, no, I'm not going to do that, and he goes along with what the business has ordered him to do, he's acting in agency of that business and also violating the law.
Okay. All right. So without getting too far into that, because that's something
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to right now. So this is associated business. So this is the private side. So let's
Mm-hmm.
move forward. So this is where we get into a publicly held corporation. So this is where you get into either you, a relative, or a member of your household is an officer or director of this publicly held corporation. Or they own stock, equity interest, stock option, debt instruments of $100,000 or more. So we kind of break this down, if we looked at, say, for example, we have let's just say my daughter works at the Ace Hardware store, or she works at, let's just say my daughter works at a small hardware store in town, right? Um, if I was to make a decision that would financially impact that business, I would have a conflict of interest because my daughter works at that. She's an employee. Now, if my
Mm-hmm.
daughter worked at Nike, it'd be different because that person's not an officer or director, or has stock options or equity interest of $100,000 or more. So that doesn't come into play. So that kind of how we break down private versus publicly held. And so next definition is what is not a business. So public body is not a business. Okay, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission is not a business. Any city, county, special district, any public body is not a business for our terms for our definitions. And the other one is a nonprofit corporation, 501c, which uh, the, uh, the public official or relative or member of your household is not in a paid capacity of that uh, nonprofit. Okay, so for example, if let's say if I served on the YMCA board, well, that's an unpaid position, so that would not be a business I'm associated with. So if I'm a member of the YMCA, that's also not a business that I'm associated with because I'm just a member. But if my daughter was an employee of YMCA, then that would be again, she's an employee, so that would make it a business which I'm associated with. So it changes things up just a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into use of office. Now we got the definitions out of the way. Now we're going to see how use of office comes into play. So prohibited use of office is basically using your official position or your official capacity for economic gain. Okay, so we use official position and use of office interchangeably. So you, as a public official, you may not use or attempt to use your official position to obtain financial gain or avoid financial detriment
Ah.
for yourself, relative, household member, or a business with yourself, relative, household member is associated with. Okay. And so a more accurate way to put it, and the way the law states it is, if the financial gain or avoidance of financial detriment would not otherwise be available, but for your holding of the official position. Okay. So that just means that you would not, this opportunity would not be presented to you and is only available to you because of the position you hold. Okay. So this could look like a number of things. Okay. So again, this is a training. So we try to keep it simple and very broad. So this could be something as simple as running personal errands in an agency vehicle, or creating a contract with a vendor to gain future employment, or something small as using an agency copy machine to make copies for your private business, or contracting a relative's construction company for a city, county, or state project. Okay.
So wouldn't wouldn't avoiding criminal charges be avoiding a financial detriment?
So
It's the reason I ask is because, for instance, every police department policy across Oregon states that a prohibited use of position or authority is avoiding consequences of your actions, legal consequences of your actions, which necessarily come with fines and fees and penalties, which is a financial detriment. So this is
so
where I'm
what's
getting
your question
confused.
again?
So this is where I'm getting confused when I make ethics complaints as to officers avoiding financial detriment by abusing their position to avoid criminal charges. That I've been told that that's not an ethics violation. That very much seems like an ethics violation. It's very unethical. It's against the code of ethics. Not only that, but all police department policies must be in line with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission
Yeah.
standards, and it talks about a prohibited use of position that's in line with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission.
Yeah, when we talk about financial gain, to obtain financial gain or avoid financial detriment, it gets more specific in like uh, we're talking about dollars going into your pocket or dollars not leaving your pocket.
Right. So if you retain your position as a police officer by avoiding the consequences of your legal acts, you continuously have dollars going into your pocket, while at the same time you're avoiding dollars coming out of your pocket.
Okay. Have you talked to someone here yet about this?
Uh, I don't remember who I talked to. It was whoever answered the phone when I called last time to find out why my complaint was rejected. When it seems to
Okay.
match the wording very well, it just seems to be like rejected because people don't want to look into it.
Okay. Well, listen, I'll you have sounds like you have some really good stuff. So just hang on to
I
it.
I have very well documented ethics
Okay.
violations.
Just hang on to it. This is a training, and
Yeah,
Robin's in there hanging on too.
this is why I wanted to come in to see like how you guys are trained so that I could understand why I'm either being rejected or why I should be accepted.
Yeah. Okay. So again, as a public official, you may not use or attempt to use your official position to obtain financial gain or avoid financial detriment. So, uh, one of the things we always kind of ask ourselves, or what you want to ask yourself, is do I only have this opportunity because of my role as a public official? And if the answer is yes, then it's probably prohibited. Okay. So this kind of falls into, let's say you work for the county and you borrow a leaf blower and a pressure washer from county maintenance for the weekend to clean up your house. Well, since that opportunity to that access to that equipment is only available to you because of the position you hold, then that would be a violation of use of office. So if you switch it up a little bit, and let's just say, for example, you go to the public library and you're making copies, and you also know the librarian's making copies. Well, if the library is open to the public and they allow copies to be made, then that wouldn't necessarily be a violation. Okay, so every state agency may have a different policy in place, but at the core of it is if that opportunity is only available to you because of the position you hold, then it's probably prohibited. Okay. Now there's some exceptions to this. So the first exception is going to be your official compensation package. So that would be your salary, your health insurance, various paid allowances such as childcare. So this would be all tied into your official compensation package. So that would not be a prohibited use of office. All right, the next one's going to be reimbursements. And so this is if your public body allows it, you are allowed to get reimbursements for expenses. And this is for like parking fees, event registration fees, meals, mileage, and training. Again, these are all expenses that we've personally paid while conducting official business as a public official. So the reimbursements still need to comply with the laws and policies that are in place, but you are allowed to apply for reimbursements for expenses.
Can you apply for reimbursements for criminal fines and fees?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that one.
I'm going to guess no, since if you're charged with a crime, you would be removed from your position as a public servant, at least as a police officer.
So are you saying if the police officer committed a crime, is that what you're saying, Ricky?
Yeah, if the police officer commits a crime and then uses his position to avoid the consequences of that crime, is that a prohibited use of position? And then if he is charged with that crime, can he get those expenses reimbursed as not being a prohibited use of position?
All right. I do want to add something in here while we're talking about it, and that's going to be if you are seeking reimbursements for expenses that you're not collecting reward points that you receive from using your personal credit card. So, for example, if you're getting reimbursed for hotel expenses, you can't keep those reward points. So that's something that's come up in the past. All right. So let's keep going with some exceptions. All right. So the next one's going to be honorarium. And honorarium is something that you receive in exchange for providing a service. So this would be something like giving a speech or a presentation. This is something that was not solicited in advance. So you do a speech, a presentation. Again, you as a public official representing your public body. And afterwards, they give you a plaque or a certificate or a commemorative token. Maybe they give you a gift card or some chocolates. You are allowed to accept that. There is a limit, though, and that's a $50 limit on honorarium.
So I have a question regarding like weddings. So
Okay,
if I was to do, in which I've always just not accepted anything because I do not know. So if I was to do a wedding, like, and it was during my work hours, I would say, no, I could not accept anything, no money for doing that service. But if I did the wedding on a weekend off my regular office hours, could I accept that, or is that using my position? See what I'm saying? I don't.
yeah. So that falls into, so gifts amongst relatives is an exception to the gifts clause.
I just, if you don't know, I just don't do it. So that's kind of my thing is if I question it, it's like, okay, I probably should not do that. Or, I try to.
So there's a whole nother training on gifts, but the quick and short answer of this for you is gifts amongst relatives is not prohibited. That's allowed. That's a gifts exception. Okay.
But what if it's not for relatives? What if it's for like somebody that, oh, I want you to do, a wedding, if it's just people I did not know.
So it's
is it a gift, or are you providing a service?
Yeah.
Well, I would be providing a service.
So that's different. So that will be in here. We're coming up on that. Okay.
Okay.
Because
sorry.
I thought you were talking about the acceptance of gifts, and that's a whole nother.
Well, it's kind of both. I mean, because sometimes people, will here, take this cup or whatever, and it's like, no, I really can't accept that. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. So the accepting of gifts, it kind of breaks down to a couple different things. I'm going to keep it real short because we're running behind right now on time.
Okay.
But it's basically making sure that what you're given meets the definition of what a gift is. And then the other thing is that what's the value of the gift? Who is the source of the gift? And then does that source have a legislative or administrative interest in you as a public official? So that's where gifts kind of fall into the core of it right there. Okay. But good question. And you should hang out and do the gifts training, because that's gets a little bit more into it than this. Doesn't cover it at all, but it gets more into it in that training. So this is going to talk about your side business though. Okay. As a wedding planner, I'm guessing that sounds like what you're talking about. Okay. So let's talk about, next one is Professional Achievement Awards. So this is going to be an award that's going to, it's acknowledging your achievement as a public official. So this is not an appreciation award. It's not an honorarium. This would be something like accepting an award for the Nobel Prize, or accepting an award for Teacher of the Year. Okay. And so this is, again, not solicited. It's just being offered you to recognize your professional achievement. And so you are allowed to accept that. Okay. So a lot of those professional achievement awards do come with a monetary prize. Sometimes they come with travel funds. You are allowed to accept those. All right. The next one is gifts. So here it is. Here's a little bit of gifts. As a public official, you are allowed to accept gifts as long as it's permitted under the gift clause. And so you can accept gifts of $50 or more from a source that has a legislative or administrative interest in you as a public official. Okay. If they have no interest in you as a public official, then there's no limit. So that gift clause doesn't apply. Okay. And so when we talk about legislative or administrative interest, we're saying that that source has an interest in our decisions that we make, our actions or votes or recommendations that we make as a public official that would affect them financially or economically. So accepting from gifts from those sources, that's where this gift clause comes into play. Again, whole another training solely based on that. And there are 16 gift exceptions to that as well. All right. Keep rolling with the exceptions. So the next one is contributions to a legal expense trust fund. We have one public official that's signed on. I don't even think it's active, but that has to be done through OGEC to establish this trust fund. And basically, it's a trust fund to assist in paying any legal expenses incurred while doing their public work as a public official. Again, it's a very complicated process. It is done through us. If this is something you want to look into to get established, you would have to reach out to us to get this set in place. All right, so you may have seen these earlier in the slides. No, I don't think you have, but let's go ahead and throw your answers in the chat. I'm going to read these out to you, and you guys just tell me which one you think are the ethics violations. So the first one's going to be using your agency's open Wi-Fi network on a personal device during breaks. The next one's picking up your spouse from the airport in an agency vehicle. Number 3, hosting fundraising flyers in a break room that's not open to the public for a nonprofit you volunteer at. Then the fourth one is accepting a $25 gift card for being a speaker at an event.
Number 2.
Yeah, number 2. What do you think, Robin? You can either throw it in the chat or you can unmute.
So you're saying which one is an ethics violation?
Yeah.
I would say they all could, I mean, except for 4, I guess. I mean, they could all potentially be using your agency's open Wi-Fi network on a personal device during breaks. I guess you're on a break.
If the network's open, that means the public can
Open.
use it too.
Yeah, let me walk you through it, okay? So the first one, yeah, you nailed it. It's open Wi-Fi, so anyone can use it, right? You're on your personal cell phone during your break. So not a violation there, okay? The second one, yeah, picking up your spouse from the airport in an agency vehicle, that's a total violation. You're using, if you're doing it on the clock, you're using agency time, you're using agency fuel, and obviously you're using an agency vehicle. Okay, so that's the big one there. And number 3, it's kind of tricky. These are all meant to kind of trip you up a little bit, but posting fundraising flyers in the break room that's not open to the public for a nonprofit you volunteer at. So it's a nonprofit, so there's no financial gain in there for you. So
And you're a volunteer.
yeah, you're a volunteer, so that's not a violation. And last one, just like we said, honorarium. As long as you're not soliciting it, you're not saying, hey, I'll show up and do this presentation, but what's in it for me, then that's a violation. But if afterwards they just come up to you and say, hey, here's a box of chocolates we're giving to all the all the folks that are giving presentations, then that's not a violation.
So on number 2, that is an ethics violation, but it's also a violation of law called misappropriating entrusted property. So it's a criminal act. So if that criminal act is an ethics violation, shouldn't all criminal acts using agency funds be ethics violations?
So it depends on whether or not that agency has a policy in place that allows it.
Whether or not the agency has a policy in place that allows a public servant to use public funds to commit a crime?
Uh, you word it that way is like, no,
Well, right.
but,
There's
but if they have so we oversee the ethics laws, but if a public body has something that allows it, they have a policy in place that allows something, then at that point, that's not something we can pursue.
But if the policy doesn't allow it, you can pursue it?
If yes,
Okay, perfect. That's what I'm trying to report with the cops.
if there's not a policy in place and they're doing this, then yeah, it's an ethics violation. So
Or if it's against policy, if there is a policy in place.
correct.
Okay, that's what I was trying to report.
Okay. So remember that prohibited gains include obtaining financial gain and avoiding an expense. And
Oh.
even if it does not result in any cost to the public body. Okay. All right. So private employment. So this is where we kind of get into what you mentioned earlier about your wedding planning. So as a public official, you are allowed, I already mentioned that there's a lot of public officials that are in non-compensated roles, right? So volunteer firefighters, right? Those are the big ones, right? So you are allowed, and even to have a job outside of your current role as a public official, even if you're compensated. The deal is here is you just got to make sure there's a clear line that's drawn between your position as a public official and your private business or your other business employer. Okay, so when we get into this, you want to make sure that you don't use your official position as a public official to create an opportunity for additional personal income. Okay. Again, make sure there's clear distinction between your use of personal resources and your time at your job. Okay. And also you want to make sure that you do not use public body resources, which is time, the computer, the printer, even your coworkers for your personal business or for your other income producing entity. So the law prohibits us from directly or indirectly soliciting or accepting the promise of future employment based on the understanding that the offer is influenced by our official votes, official actions, or judgments. So the example we put in here is, let's just say, for example, you own a t-shirt printing business. You also work for the county. So the first thing is you cannot advertise your business at the county office, okay? You cannot do your t-shirt printing business on county time. And when I say that, I just mean like you can't answer emails or make flyers or send out mailers on county time. You also cannot sell your items to your coworkers when you or your coworkers are on the clock. And also you cannot create an opportunity for the county to solicit your t-shirt printing business. That just means that, let's just say for the county is looking for someone to print t-shirts, or maybe the county isn't looking for someone to print t-shirts, but it would be, you come up with this idea that, hey, wouldn't it be great if we all were matching county t-shirts? And guess what? I can print those up for us and give us a good deal on it. So that would be, where you've crossed that line between your official position and going in to create an opportunity for yourself. All right. So the thing you want to remember, and this is kind of how you break it down, is you want to use no governmental body time for your private employment, no governmental body resources, take no official action that could financially impact your private business, use no confidential information obtained through your position as a public official. And the last one is disclose all conflicts of interest. So we'll talk about conflicts of interest that's coming up here pretty quick. Now, let's say, for example, you're a public official and one of your responsibilities is authorizing contracts. Okay, so one of the rules in ORS 244 specifically says that a public official who has authorized or played a significant role in a public contract cannot legally work under that contract for a period of 2 years from the date of authorization. So basically what they're saying is you can't sign off on a contract and then work for that private entity under that same contract that you signed off on for a period of until 2 years have passed. Okay. So then we get into authorized. So what does authorized mean? And when we talk about authorized, we're talking about you've played a significant role. So that could be selecting a contractor. It could be executing the contract. It could be recommending approval. It could be signing the contract, or it could be serving on a selection committee. Okay. So, you know, it doesn't mean that, hey, I didn't sign the contract, so I didn't play a significant role. But, you know, if part of your job was negotiating vendors for that contract, and maybe you didn't actually sign that contract, but you found the vendors, you did play a considerable role in that contract. So you would have to follow that 2-year waiting period. All right, so another knowledge check. So I'm going to throw another poll at you real quick. And I'm going to mute while you guys tackle that. Awesome. Thanks for answering that. Okay, so this is probably one you've already seen before. I think it's worded a little bit different, but you've developed a close working relationship with a school vendor who has a job opening available. I think the other one said it was a renter. Okay, so you contact the vendor and recommend your daughter for the job. Have you violated ethics law? Tell me what you think. Either unmute or shoot it in the chat.
I think it's true.
Sorry, I missed that. What was that?
Saying you developed a close working relationship with a school vendor who has a job opening available. You contact the vendor and recommend your daughter for the job. Have you violated the ethics law? True or false?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So explain to me why that's a violation.
You're essentially advocating for a financial benefit for your daughter through a close contact in another agency.
So yeah, keep it in simple terms. Both of y'all got it right, by the way. Okay, so the idea here is you've got a relationship with a school vendor, right? So that's something that you would not have other than your official position, right? The job opening is available. Again, you know, they're probably calling you saying, hey, I've got this position available. Do you know anyone? And you get your daughter the job, right? Or you recommend your daughter for the job. So yeah, that goes back into using your official position for financial gain or yourself, your relative, or a member of your household. And so your daughter falls in the definition of relative. So yeah, that would be an ethics violation. All right, true. There you go. All right, so if we switch it around just a little bit, and you can kind of see where just the smallest little bits change things up quite a bit. So instead, it's one of your family friends that you're recommending for the job. Would doing so violate Oregon government ethics law? So in this case, it would be no, because a family friend is not a relative. And so That would be no financial gain for you, your relative, or a member of your household, or a business which they are associated with. So this would be a no. All right. So in addition to your role as a public official, you also own your own business. Can you promote your business by posting flyers in the agency's break room?
No.
Okay, so this one's a catch, okay? This one's made to trip you up a little bit. So the answer is only if it's open to the general public, okay? So if anyone can post flyers on this board and you're posting as a public official, you're posting your side business on that same bulletin board, then it's okay. But if you're only posting it inside an agency bulletin board the public has no access to, then it becomes a use of office violation.
You should probably add that to the end of the question. In your agency's break room, not open to the public.
Yeah, the way they broke it down.
That's kind of
yeah,
open-ended.
yeah, I agree. Some of these are a little bit, but here's the idea: they're trying to make you think. So
Yeah.
they're challenging you. So at first it seems like, man, this is kind of weird, but the idea is to get your gears running.
Do we have any public agencies with a break room that is open to the public?
I have no idea.
I mean, I've never been in a public building that has one open to the public, so.
I mean, yeah, I have no idea. I couldn't tell you. I know I came from another state agency from another state, and our break room was open to the public.
Okay.
So that's
I
where
guess ours would be considered open to the public because it's out in the hallway in the law library between the district attorney's office and my office. So
Okay.
it's like a little coffee machine or coffee pot and whatever. That's our little break room.
Yeah, we had
But really, nothing is ever posted out there at all. I mean, other than what's required by law, for, you know.
Yeah, we had a Coke machine and a vending machine. That was pretty much open space. So.
Do you work for a district attorney's office, Robin?
No, I don't. I'm the justice of the peace. I only handle traffic violations and small claims and FEDs here in the county. All criminal matters go up to circuit court.
What about mandatory reporting?
About what?
What about mandatory reporting?
Yes, I'm a mandatory reporter. Is that what you're saying?
Okay.
Asking?
Yeah, I'm a disabled individual, and those police that I keep talking about are the ones that financially and exploited me and abused me. And it's all recorded on my YouTube channel that I posted in the chat.
Okay, let's keep rolling. I'm running way behind now. So here's another example. So let's say you only deliver orders, you advertise on social media, you hand out your business cards, flyers outside the office while not acting in your capacity as a public official. Would doing so violate Oregon government ethics law? So you kind of know the answer to this one, right? That would be no. So as long as you're putting out flyers and handing out business cards outside the office, it's not a violation. All right. And this one's like in every training. So your public body, and you both answered it right because I looked at it right before I cancel it out. But your public body has an account to get you 15% discount at the local hardware store. While doing your personal shopping, you ask for the public body's discount. Have you violated ethics law?
Hold on.
So y'all both answered yes on this, I believe. And the idea here is why, how we break it down is this discount is only available to you because of your position as a public official, right? So using that discount for your personal use would be avoidance of financial detriment by getting that discount. So yeah, that would be a violation. All right. So conflicts of interest. So this one gets a little bit tricky at times. So I'm going to throw this question out at you and we're going to come back and see it again. So just kind of think about it for a minute. You don't have to answer, just think about it. So you are responsible for managing vendor contracts for the agency. Your mother owns a business supply company, which may or may not put in a bid for a project. Okay. So you kind of just think about that for a minute because conflict of interest can get kind of tricky. So there's two types of conflicts of interest. There's potential and then there's actual, or we say actual conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest. The easy one out of the two is going to be actual conflict of interest. Okay. So the way we define this is you have a conflict of interest if any action you make as a public official. And so when we say action, we mean
Be quiet. I'll
your
be in a minute.
official capacity to make a vote, a decision, a recommendation that would be to the private financial benefit or financial detriment to yourself as a public official, your relatives, or any business that you or your relatives are associated with. Okay? So that's an actual conflict of interest. And that means that this action, whatever action you take, would with certainty create a financial effect. Okay? Again, on you, your relative, or a business which you or your relative is associated with. So let's say, for example, your role as a public official, you issue business permits, and your parents who already own a business submit an application for another business permit. And your job is approving or disapproving this permit. That's your job, right? Well, you approving or disapproving that permit would have a financial impact on your parents, right? Which are relatives by the definition. So that conflict would be actual, okay? So any action you take would create a certain financial effect for your parents. So that's an actual conflict of interest. Now, when we get into potential, it changes up just a little bit. So the potential, it's any action, again, that you would make as a public official that could be to the private financial benefit or detriment to yourself as a public official, your relative, or a business that you or your relative is associated with. So that just means that if that decision you make would that financial effect would be possible, but it's not certain. Okay. So the example we have in here is basically, let's just say you're part of a team that's putting together a new database that's accessible to the public. Okay. You have a brother that's an employee of an IT consulting business. Okay. The team that you're in is discussing whether or not to seek bids for an IT consultant to join the team. Okay. So being that your brother is a relative by the law's definition, and they are an employee with a consulting business, that means that that's a business which they are associated with. At this stage, it's potential because it's not certain if they'll even put in a bid, right? It's not even certain that they'll even get the contract. But the idea here is that because it's uncertain, it's potential, okay? So that just means that it would, it could create, it could create a financial benefit, but it's uncertain, okay? So that's where we get in potential. So when you have a conflict of interest, the way we break it down is, your official action as a public official, and that's, in your capacity to make a decision, a vote, or recommendation, and that would or could have result in a financial benefit or a financial detriment, meaning an economic impact. And then it has to be on a specified people, and that would be you, a relative, or a business which you or a relative is associated with. Okay. So if it's actual or potential, you still need to disclose it by declaring the conflict and then following through with disposing it. Okay. So let's go back to that first question. You're responsible for managing vendor contracts for the agency. Your mother owns a business supply company, which may or may not put in a bid for a contract. So this is a two-part question, so I'm going to throw at you. So do you have a conflict of interest? That's the first one, yes or no?
You would have a potential conflict of interest.
Okay.
Yeah, potential.
And you'd have to disclose that. I mean, if you disclose that and said, if my mother puts in for this, I would have to recuse myself from making any sort of.
There you go.
Right.
So that's it. So my question is two parts. So the first one is, again, I'm just trying to get your brain going here. So the first one is, do you have a conflict of interest? So y'all nailed that already, right? So your mother works for a business and you guys are putting out contracts and your mom may apply for it, right? So that's a conflict of interest. But because she may or may not put in a bid, makes it potential. So you got it. So it once that bid goes in, guess what? It goes from potential to actual, right?
Yeah.
Because that decision you make, now that it's in front of you, could financially impact her, whether you accept it or not. It's actual. So, all right. So what if you're met with a conflict of interest? So you kind of nailed it, Robin. We're not going to get into all the scenarios, but the most common one here is the process for declaring a conflict of interest is going to be different for different public officials. Okay, so your role as a public official is going to determine how you're going to dispose this conflict of interest. Okay, so if you're serving on a board or a commission or you're elected official, it's going to be different than, say, you're an employee. Okay, so today we're going to look at the process for employees and then those folks that are appointed officials, commissions, and board members. Okay, so if you're a board member, a commissioner, or an elected official, the first thing you need to do, if it's potential, you must publicly announce the potential conflict of interest. And this is each time before acting. Okay, so if we use that example where your mom owns a catering business and may or may not put in a bid, each time this conflict comes up, you have to publicly announce it. Okay, even though everyone may know by now that your mom owns this catering business, that you still have to publicly announce it each time. Okay, so on each action or each occasion before acting. Okay, if it's an actual conflict of interest, then again, you still must publicly announce that it's an actual conflict of interest. And again, that's on each occasion. And then from there, you cannot participate in any discussion, debate, or voting. Okay. So basically, you declare the conflict of interest. Hey, my mom owns a catering business. We're talking about hiring a contract for a catering business. I can no longer participate in this. Okay. And that has to be publicly announced. This can't be just amongst the board. This is something that has to be publicly in public records, on the website, in public meeting. It just has to be declared publicly. All right, so there is some rules that kind of fall into place. So in order to keep government moving forward, there is an exception to the voting rule. And basically, if you find yourself in a situation where multiple members have a conflict of interest, an official can vote if their vote is needed to meet quorum. Okay, they still cannot participate in any discussion or debate on the matter, and that public announcement still has to be made, but they can still vote. They just cannot participate in any discussion or debate, and that's only if to meet quorum, to make sure that government moves forward. Okay, so you're always making that public announcement, and again, you may not discuss or debate it. So you would have to make that announcement, step out, and then come in and make that final vote. All right, so here's another one to make your gears work a little bit. You're reviewing bids or roofing contractors. Your son works for one of the companies that submitted a bid, but he works in the residential division. It would not be working on the agency's project. So let me ask you the first part. You have a conflict of interest. That's the first part.
I'd say potential again.
Yeah, potential.
Okay, so first, conflict of interest. Yeah, your son works for a business, right? He's an employee, so that's a business which you're associated with because you have a relative that works there, right? So that's the first part. And so the second part is yeah, it's an actual conflict of interest, okay? Because if you're reviewing bids, that means that bid is in front of you. So you accepting that bid or rejecting that bid is going to have a financial impact on that business, okay? So it doesn't matter not whether your son works in the division, a different division, them winning that contract going to affect that business entirely, right? So that may trickle down in your son getting a raise or maybe a promotion or maybe a bigger Christmas bonus, okay? So just keep in mind that if you have an actual conflict of interest, it does need to be stated, and then you have to bow out of participating in discussion, vote, or action. You see how it's kind of a little bit more broad? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So employees, it's a little bit different. So employees, you must provide written notice. Okay. So that would be, shooting an email, typing something up. You must give it to your supervisor. You have to describe the conflict. And again, like everything else, you have to, on each occasion, disclose this conflict of interest. Okay. But when you provide written notice, it has to do two things. It has to not only to describe the conflict, but also you have to request how the conflict is to be disposed. Okay. So again, let's just say, for example, you're processing business permits and your parents' business permit lands in front of you. You'd have to declare first off that your parents put in an application for that permit. Now it's landed in front of you. you have to go to your boss and say, well, how do I handle this? Do I process it? Do I hand it to someone else? And your boss should be the one to decide or to tell you how to dispose of that conflict. Okay. And they may tell you, just process it like you do any other. They may tell you, just give it to me, I'll process it, or it may be given to someone else to process. So if an employee, again, I want to just reinstate that an employee has a conflict of interest, it must be in writing, stating the conflict of interest to their supervisor, and then also how to dispose of it. Okay. Okay, and then it goes into the public body's response. So I kind of got ahead of myself. So the notice must be recorded in official records of the public body, and then the supervisor will either assign a task to someone else or instruct the employee on how to proceed. Okay.
That seems like what should have happened with the police officers arresting me. They should have had somebody else look into it, not the ones who committed crimes against me.
So let's see here. Let's go ahead and launch the last set of polls. You've seen these already, so I'm kind of, all this poll does, it's anonymous, and all it does is it's gauging whether or not this training is working. So I'm going to mute and let y'all do that. All right, so let's keep rolling. So you probably saw this next one in that poll. So your agency contracts with a consulting firm. Your spouse was recently employed by this firm, but does not work on agency-related projects. Would you have a conflict of interest if a contracting matter involving the firm came before you? So again, I break it down in two parts. Is it a conflict of interest? And then is it actual or potential? What do you think?
I'd say no, because it says was recently employed.
Yeah.
Not currently.
Yeah, that's supposed to be meaning that your spouse was recently employed by them. So it means current. It's probably worded.
But recently hired. Okay, then
yeah.
Then yes, there's a conflict of interest.
Okay, so you got a conflict of interest. Now, is it actual or potential?
It's still actual, even though they don't work directly on the same project.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so we break this down by it's an actual you have a conflict of interest, right? Your spouse works for this business, right? So that automatically makes that business, if it's a private business, then it's a business which you're related to, right? And so it's actual because if they win the contract, that company is going to have a financial gain, which may roll over into your spouse's getting a raise or a promotion. So it affects the business which your relative is associated with. So it's a financial gain. So that would be a definite conflict of interest, and it's actual. All right. So instead, let's switch it up a little bit. Instead, the consulting firm employs your cousin. Would you have a conflict of interest?
No.
Yeah, no, because by definition of the law, cousin is not your relative. Okay.
Unless he lives.
So that would change up. It would change up if well, now it wouldn't change it at all. So yeah.
Unless he lives with you, then it would change.
Yeah, conflict of interest doesn't apply to members of your household.
Oh, okay.
Relative or a business which your relative is associated with. use of office is going to
Use of office. Gotcha.
use of office comes into play for household members. All right. So let's say you're serving on a board and discussing licensing requirements for agency vendors. Your father-in-law owns a catering business that sometimes puts in bids for agency contracts. You have a conflict of interest when discussing this at meetings. So remember the two parts. You have a conflict of interest, first thing, and is it actual or potential?
Potential. Depends on whether or not he puts in a bid.
There you go. So you'd have to, so what would you need to do? So number one, if you're in a position where you're going to be making official action that would impact them, so that would be, you'd have to state it publicly, right? And then refrain from voting or
discussion.
There you go.
Any official action.
You got it. All right. So instead, let's switch it up a little bit. What if you're an employee instead of a board member? Would you have a conflict of interest? So I switched it up. Just remember that employee part I talked about?
It would be no, because you're an employee.
Almost. So yeah, you'd still have a conflict of interest, okay? Because remember, if you're an employee, that makes that business a business that you're associated with, okay? So you'd still have that conflict of interest. Now, if you're an employee, you'd have something different you'd have to do. So you still have to state that you have a conflict of interest, but you'd have to do that in writing, right? You'd have to shoot an email saying conflict of interest and how do I handle it? How do I dispose of it? Okay. So you're not making a vote, you're not making a discussion, you're just an employee. So your role is just letting the people know in writing and directing you how to dispose of it. All right, so that wraps up this training. We did go a little bit over time-wise, but again, this is the 5 parts of Oregon government ethics law. We do take complaints. Complaints cannot be anonymous. There always has to be a name tied to it. They do go through a preliminary review. They do go through investigation if there's something there that needs to be looked at. There are penalties tied if there is a violation. Civil penalties at $5,000 max. If there's a willful violation, it's $10,000. There's a forfeiture, and then we do a lot of letters of education because a lot of folks get snagged by not knowing the ethics laws. And so for a lot of first-time offenders, depending on the offense, a lot of folks get a letter of education. And another thing that we offer at OGEC is staff advice. So if for you, Robin, since you're a public official, if you find yourself in a situation where someone's offered you a gift or is giving you something that's kind of making your gut not feel right about it, reach out to us. We'll look at your situation and give you advice as to what your next move will be. So
Thank you.
Does this also include like police officers? So recently, House Bill 2929 was passed regarding police officers witnessing misconduct or crimes of other police officers and having a duty to report it or intervene within 72 hours. So does that create a conflict of interest for other police officers that witness the misconduct and do nothing about it?
So when it comes to staff advice, this is going to be specific to ethics laws, okay? That we have jurisdiction over. So
ethics
staff advice, staff opinions, and commissionary advisory opinions. That's for example, you're as a public official, you've been offered a gift, or someone's is paying for your flight, or someone's offered you a free car or something like that.
No, I don't mean in the context of advice. I mean in the context of conflict of interest. If say there's 4 police officers that witness one police officer committing a crime and they all do nothing about it, do they then have a conflict of interest in any of the discussions or outcomes or official actions that take place in regards to that officer's commission of a crime?
Oof, that's a good question.
Because that's what it seems like you just explained to me.
Let's see.
Because so I put the laws in the chat here, but ORS 181A.681 is titled Report of Misconduct or Violation of Minimum Standards. As used in this section, misconduct means D, a crime.
Yeah.
And then it says under 181A.710, Section 3, intent. Section 2 goes over a law enforcement agency or a person acting on behalf of a law enforcement agency may not act in concert with another law enforcement agency, such as a district attorney's office or a court or a sheriff, another police department, etc., to engage in misconduct, a crime, barred by a court order or statute, which the last one was a statute 181A.681, a crime. And then
Yeah.
it says intentional violation of this section constitutes official misconduct in the second degree, which is necessarily an ethics violation. It's talking about official misconduct, which is what the
Yeah.
ethics commission covers.
Yeah, that's out of my jurisdiction. That's out of my
It
wheelhouse, but I made a note of it on here so I can follow up with it. Okay.
seems very much within your jurisdiction, as you're sitting here talking about. They can't use their official position to avoid consequences or financial detriments, which is
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Okay, so
But my
let's
YouTube channel is essentially a giant OGEC complaint. I go around
okay.
and I film officials committing misconduct. And so you
Okay.
guys
All right.
have like probably a couple years worth of investigations you could do just on the YouTube channel that I gave you.
Okay.
And they're
All
all
right.
Oregon officials.
Okay. All right. Let's see. And then the last part of this is going to be our website, which has lots of resources for public officials, which is going to be public records. Also, you can look up public officials as well, as far as their filing at SEIs, our training, which everyone here took a training, and then complaints. Is there any questions for me right now over this training, specifically over this training?
Not over this training, but if you would like to stay in contact with me and maybe hash all this out so that we can figure out why public officials are abusing their positions and what we can do about it, that would be great.
Okay, let's see. What's your biggest takeaway from today?
That you pretty much told me I was right about them committing ethics violations.
Robin, what was your biggest takeaway today?
It just basically, just kind of summarize the whole ethics. I mean, part as what's considered yes, what's conflict of interest in.
So when I say your biggest takeaway, what was your big aha moment for you, Robin?
The big aha moment.
Yeah.
I guess basically just the use of your position,
Yeah.
and how you could potentially abuse it, and not, and I think I kind of go the other way. If I don't know, I don't do it. I don't
Yeah.
even push it to that. I'm like, well, it's probably okay. Well, I just don't do it. If I don't know for sure, I don't do it.
Yeah. It's like
You should.
I mean, it could be something as simple as, hey, I need to park my RV at the city lot for the weekend. That's that's a violation right there, because again, you wouldn't be able to park your RV on city property if it wasn't for your position, and
Right.
you're avoiding having to pay storage fees somewhere else. So
Mhm.
it's real easy to kind of overlook it when
So I do have a quick question. I don't know
Yeah.
if this is, so like my position on and I never serve on boards like fair boards. I mean, they're like rodeo, nonprofit. Because I didn't know, but I've asked to serve on, some boards, and I choose not to. But I'm wondering if that is something that would be a potential. So if I was serving on like say a fair board, and I was sitting on the board making decisions on budgetary things, and somebody there in turn come before me on the bench or got a traffic violation, and they said, well, you know what, we donated money towards the fair, and then they turn around and ask for, can you reduce my fine or something like that?
Yeah.
That
Could
would be a violation.
That would be a
Yeah.
violation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that would require recusal.
Yeah. So So I just don't serve on a board because I don't put myself in that position, but we're such a small community. It's really hard to turn down people because we have
Well,
so many, we don't have that many volunteers here.
well,
So,
here's another way to look at it. I mean, they can donate whatever they want, but
right,
they, them turning around asking for a favor, that's a simple no.
That's called
right.
extortion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
and
idea,
and I just, like I say, I don't serve on the board because those things just run through my mind because
Yeah.
that could happen. And so I just don't do it. But then I feel bad for not,
yeah.
volunteering for
So
some
you,
things. And
so you
so
always have
anyway,
to, so you always have to remember that, with use of office, it's always going to be, is it a financial gain or avoidance of financial detriment? Is that
right,
opportunity only available because of you being a public official? So that's use of office. Conflict of interest comes into play when any decision you make would affect you, your relative, or a business which you or your relative is associated with. Okay. So if it now gifts is something else entirely different. Now, if that vendor came up to you and said, hey, we bought you tickets to that, uh, the Portland Blazers game, and those tickets were $100 a pop, and we want you to, push us through. Well, you accepting those tickets would be a violation because that.
right, right.
But you
I
say,
think I'm
well,
just going to stick with what I've been doing. If I don't know, don't do it. And it's better just not
yeah.
to do it or get involved in that kind of thing.
At the end of the day, it's how close do you want to get to it, and
Yeah.
how comfortable you are with it. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right, Robin, have a good one.
So
Yeah, you too.
on that example of using the vehicle to take someone to the airport,
Yeah.
since that's obviously an unlawful use of the vehicle by virtue of position, if an officer intentionally falsely arrests someone or kidnaps them, i.e., taking them without lawful authority, wouldn't the subsequent use of the use of the handcuffs at first, but then the subsequent use of the vehicle for an unlawful purpose, just like transporting a relative to the airport, if transporting a relative is an ethics violation, how is kidnapping somebody and using a city vehicle to transport them not an ethics violation?
Yeah, that's a little different.
Why?
Because the
That
by
action would not have been available but for the person's position as a officer.
but that's for financial gain or financial detriment. That's not costing them out of pocket to go pick them up in their personal vehicle. So if they take their personal vehicle, they would be driving in their own car, which they have to pay insurance on.
Right. I'm talking about if an officer unlawfully uses his vehicle to transport someone that he has seized unlawfully.
Yeah.
Both uses of the vehicle are unlawful. Both of his actions are unlawful and would not be available but for his position as a public officer. And committing those crimes and getting away with them is avoiding a financial detriment, criminal fines and fees, by position of the public officer.
Yeah, this is something that
It's like the most plain ethics violations you could possibly get to. It doesn't even require a family, friend, or relative or anything. It's all personal.
yeah, this is
I
something I have to go to.
I can't go take a cop's car and use it to transport someone unlawfully. Only a cop can do that.
Yeah.
And if it's illegal to transport your relative in that same car, then it must be illegal to transport someone, a victim that you're victimizing as you commit a crime that you would not be able to get away with but for your position.
Yeah, let's see. I'm writing it down. Unlawful transfer victim or hostage.
Because kidnapping is just the unlawful taking of a person.
Okay, let me put that kid. Yeah, this sounds. So this is something I have to go to our lawyer.
I was
our
gonna say
in-house
I
lawyer.
understand a lot of people, like most of the time when there's police misconduct, it's handled on the civil side of the court.
Yeah.
But why are police officers able to engage in criminal acts that they would not be able to get away with but for their use of position and not get charged with crimes? When the police chapter 181A specifically says that misconduct is a crime.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal.
Why are they
Ricky.
protected from arrest? That seems unethical. That seems
Yeah.
like a two-tier system of justice.
Well, here's the deal, Ricky. I mean, it sounds like something really bad has happened to you, right? It
Yeah,
sounds like
my girlfriend's sitting in Coffee Creek right now because of all of this conduct that I'm telling you about.
yeah, and it sounds
Out of
like,
retaliation by Eugene police officers.
and I'll be honest with you, I'm the trainer side of this stuff, and I'm on the, I kind of do the overview of the trainings.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get into something like what you're talking about, where there's just multiple layers of activity going on, then I have to refer that to the legal side of our department. And so because only they can give you the right answer to that. If any answer I give to you, I'd be guessing, and that wouldn't do either of us any good. So that's why I'm kind of like, these are great questions. And man, I feel really bad for what's happened to you. But unfortunately, this stuff it's over my head. So I have to refer this to
Like I
our
said,
legal.
this is not a very common situation for people to be in, especially like I have 7 different officers that are retaliating against me, all
Yeah.
working together to cover up each other's criminal acts, including solicitation of a crime. We have Sergeant Wright recorded live stream on YouTube soliciting a trespass against me in a public building for not doing anything wrong. Solicitation of a crime is a crime.
Yeah.
And he wasn't arrested.
This is in Eugene, you said?
Yeah. And I've been reporting this to literally every agency I can get my hands on over the past 2 years. This happened in 2021, November 3rd, 2021.
Okay.
And so if you look in the chat under 181A.710, Eugene Police Department acted in concert with Lane County District Attorney's Office, who upheld their perjured affidavit and used that perjured affidavit to falsely convict Amy Hall, who's sitting in Coffee Creek right now, based on their lies and their avoidance of legal consequences that would not be available but for their position.
Yeah, this sounds intense. Sounds like there's a lot going on here. I don't know what. Yeah, I really can't put an opinion on this or
It needs to be investigated is what needs to happen. I understand it's a lot to take in right now and it's probably just like speeding over your head.
yeah, yeah,
but it does need to be investigated because in those same laws, so I'll even send you guys the legislative draft manual, the guide that legislators use to draft laws. In that they determine that the use of the word shall denotes a mandatory term.
yeah,
So under the district attorney's laws, it says the district attorney shall prosecute public offenses. The district attorney is not prosecuting public offenses. He's engaging in public offenses by falsely charging me and my partner, which is 181A.710, acting in concert with another law enforcement agency to engage in misconduct, barred by
Have you
statute.
have you spoke to a lawyer about this by chance?
Yeah, I'm on, I think, my 8th public defender because they also are engaging in the same misconduct and refuse to follow the laws and rules of professional conduct, which again is ethics violations, which I've reported, which nobody seems to think is ethical or an ethical violation.
Yeah. Well, like I said, all I can do is move it up the ladder and talk to our legal team here and see what they want to do with it.
Yeah, I would highly suggest checking out YouTube and going through each video and comparing the conduct of the officers to the crimes that their conduct matches. And then ask yourself, why is this not an ethical violation?
Yeah.
Or how is this not an ethical violation? Because it is.
Well, I'll take a look at it. Hey, Ricky, thanks for your
Appreciate it.
time today. And hey, I hope for better things for you in the future. All right.
Thanks. Should be going into court in July or so to try to beat this guy, but who knows with the way they're doing things.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, be safe out there. Okay.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. See ya.
Bye.